If you haven't watched part 1 of my scandalous love affair with a married man 24 years my senior, click out of this video and go watch part 1 till the end. Part 2 will only make sense if you understand the story so far. Let's continue the story.
Stitching and bitching about plaything and fiction. He was a bore, he was a thrill. Let's Netflix and chill.
Just to recap the story so far, I'm involved with a married man 24 years. My senior, his name is Carlos, and he is married to Shannon. Carlos and I work together, but he has a home in Pennsylvania. His wife, Shannon, lives in their Pennsylvania home, but has found out about our affair down in Virginia, where we're both working and living. Shannon starts to accompany Carlos to his work trips down to Virginia, and she sometimes goes back, and this is the pattern for weeks at a time. It is Valentine's Day, let's say 2008. I believe it was 2008. And Shannon is back in she and Carlos's Pennsylvania home that they share. So that means Carlos is at his corporate apartment alone, and it's been this way for a couple of weeks at this point since Shannon has been back in Pennsylvania. During the time that Shannon is away, Carlos and I continue to see each other, and we approach Valentine's Day, and he had gifted me a silver watch, which he dropped off at my apartment a day or two before Valentine's Day. He came to my apartment, gifted me this beautiful present, and he asked me not to open it until the next day, which is Valentine's Day. But after he left, I ended up opening it anyway, and it was this beautiful silver watch. So that was my very beautiful Valentine's Day gift. So I am ready for the next night. I got my outfit, my makeup, everything planned out. We approach Valentine's Day and plan this romantic dinner, yada, 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 at his apartment. He was going to cook with his terrible cooking, and I was going to come over after work, and we were just going to have this super romantic Valentine's night. That was the plan. Well, February 14th gets here, and I work all day. I get off work, I get in my car, drive towards his apartment. I can remember the route because there was a back route that you can take to get to his apartment complex. I remember it like it was yesterday. And as I'm driving, he calls me on my cell phone. So I answer my cell phone while I'm driving, and he says, "She's here." And I remember just stopping the car, pulling over, and sitting in my car for like 20 minutes before I even got back on the road. I was so fed up I was fed up, right? I was so fed up at this point with all of this back and forth. And I'm starting to get fed up with Carlos. I think this is the first time where I started to direct my frustrations and my anger. The anger should have been towards Carlos this entire time. He was the one running the show. He was the adult. He was the one who had 2 women who were fighting for his love and affection, and he should have been the one to stop it on either side. If he wanted to be with his wife, end it with me and be with your wife. If you wanted to be with me, end it with her and be with me. But he was having it both ways, and on that phone call is when I stopped, and it hit me that, okay, you're the problem here because you are continuing to allow this to happen. After he called and told me that she's here, I don't even recall what I said after or what my response was. I just remember blanking out, and I go home to my downtown apartment. And y'all, I could have and should have ended it there, right? That should have been the end of this saga. But I'm so crazy and gaga over this guy. What I do is I go home, 25-minute drive. My hair, makeup, clothes are already done because I was on my way to his apartment. So I go home and I call my friend Angie. I call Angie. Angie is aware of the relationship I'm having with Carlos at this point. She knows the situation with Shannon. She's aware that he's been going back and forth between the two, and so she is completely aware of the situation. I call Angie, and I ask her to come over. Angie comes over to my apartment, and I tell Angie the situation, and Angie and I decide, and Angie went along with, to go out to Carlos's corporate apartment and confront the both of them. So this is my way of being fed up, and I get in my car, Angie in the passenger seat. She's dressed to the nines. She has a full face of makeup on. I'm dressed to the nines, full face of makeup. And we're going to go out to this apartment and confront Carlos and his wife. 25-minute drive back to the area where he's living. Angie and I get out of the car, heels clack, clack, clacking on the pavement. And we go up to Carlos's apartment. I remember it being like an episode of Cops where you have the first perspective camcorder and the door is just wobbling and getting closer and closer. That's what I remember walking up to this apartment. And as soon as we get to the door, all you hear was screaming and yelling. They were fighting so ferociously from inside the apartment. And all I hear is Shannon just screaming at him. I think he was screaming back. She was doing most of the hollering. And I knock on the door. And as soon as I knocked on the door, there was silence. And I know that Carlos literally shit his pants when he heard that door knock because he knew who it was. And I knock on the door, and I'm not standing in front of the door. I knock on the door, and I stand to the side of the door. And Shannon opens the door. This is my first time seeing her physically. She looks to the left, I'm not there. She looks to the right, I'm standing right outside the door. Shannon immediately walks towards me and says, "You have been affecting my marriage." And I wish I can tell you what she said after that, but I just remember this small woman coming up to me, and it was like Charlie Brown's teacher. Womp, 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 womp. I didn't hear her. I didn't take in what she was saying. I just stood there and stared at her in her face, and I remember smiling. Angie is also there, but she's standing across the hall. So she is behind Shannon. Shannon's facing me, and I'm facing Shannon. And Shannon was confronting me for 1 or 2 minutes. And she speaks very fast, and I have no idea what she said. I was so blanked out in the situation. And then Carlos comes out and says, Shannon, get back in the house. So he's trying to calm her down. And he tells Shannon to get back in the house. And she's not listening, of course. She's just there blabbing at me. And he's like, Shannon, just get back in the house. And she goes in, just get back in the house. He ended up pulling her body in the house. Not in a violent way, but just like just assisting her, per se, in the house. And then he said something to me. I was so blanked out that I went out there ready to confront someone, and I was just completely spaced out, that I just didn't hear or say anything. And he said something to me. I don't remember what it was. And then all of a sudden I snapped and I just cursed him and her out. I'm just flying out with F-bombs. I'm flying out with S-bombs. I'm letting him know what he's done to me, and she cheated on him, and you should leave her, and yada, yada, yada. So that's when the confrontation, quote unquote, came out. And he just stands there and he takes it. Carlos is not a confrontational man. He's very soft-spoken, very calm. He's scandalous and manipulative, but he's not boisterous. He's not confrontational. So if you're going to give him the news, he's going to sit there and take it. And that's what he did. And that's what I could clearly hear his wife doing to him before the door even opened. And after I'm done cursing him out, I'm sure the neighbors were peeking outside of the door like... I'm sure the neighbors were peeking outside of the door like Home Alone 2 when Macaulay Culkin played that video game, and all the neighbors were sort of like standing out. And he goes back in and he closes the door. And I had my Valentine's Day gift with me. And I took the watch and all the wrapping and I just launched it at the closed door. So I threw the watch at the door, and the watch just crashes into the door and lands somewhere on the sidewalk, and I just left it there. So whoever picked up I don't know how much Carlos spent on that watch, but whoever picked it up after that, there you go. And we drove home. I don't remember crying. I actually don't remember much that happened after that. I was so zoned out of the situation that we just drove into the night. After the Valentine's Day confrontation, I remember working, going to school as usual, and having minimal communication with Carlos. He checked in on me here and there, and the understanding is that Shannon did not return to Pennsylvania at all this time. She was staying there. She moved in. She was living there with him until he got in the car or got on the train or however he got back home and went back to their house. They were going together. She was not leaving his sight. She was standing firm on her marriage. Again, which she should have done. Telling this story now, I am completely on Shannon's side here. I just wanted to make that clear. This is a situation that happened, and it happened in my youth 20 years ago. I was wrong on my part. Carlos was definitely wrong on his part. He was the ringleader here, but I'm siding with Shannon in this whole situation. So that's what she did. She moved in, lived with him. I would email him on the work email about the status, or about when am I going to see you again, or about is she still here, because I wasn't done. Even after that situation, I was not done. I was so hard-headed. I was going to see this thing all the way through until it was firmly ended by Carlos, and there was a hard breakup from his end, but he never did that. And I was stupid enough to just continue to hold on to hope that he would leave his wife and be with me forever. After the confrontation, several weeks had passed, and March goes by, April goes by, May goes by. And I remember it being around May when Carlos has to go back to his place of residence. I'm going to put another note out there that this was around the time of the financial crisis of 2008. A lot of consultants were being laid off of work and people were losing their jobs. And sadly, Carlos was falling into that hole. Actually, our whole company that we worked in, the brokerage firm, everyone was reorging. Some people got laid off, some people got fired, some people got moved to new departments, some people's jobs switched, including mine. I was working as an operations specialist for mutual funds and securities, and then they switched me to doing the same thing, but instead of being completely fully back office, I was doing it in more of a call center format, which I hated. But I didn't lose my job like some other people did. They switched me to a different role, so I was sort of doing 2 for 1 at the same job. Carlos's contract had ended around May of that year, and he was set to go back to his residence in Pennsylvania, which was normal. He would stay there for a few months and then go back and then come back whenever his contract renewed a few weeks later. This time, Carlos met me. This is months after Valentine's Day. I had not seen him again since then. Carlos met me. I think we met in a mutual place. And he wanted to let me know that he was going to try to figure things out with Shannon. He didn't say that he was going to try to work it out with her per se, but he was going to try to figure out the situation. So if I could just hang tight, he was going to figure things out. And I remember just hysterically crying and pleading for him to stay, for him to leave her and come live with me. It'll be okay. You can just stay with me and stay here until your contract renews. Don't go back home. And he said no, he was going to go back to Pennsylvania. And that's what he did. He got in his car and he drove off and he went back to Pennsylvania. Now, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to go back, but he'll be back in a few weeks, just like how it always is. He goes for a couple of weeks, a few weeks, and then he comes back on assignment and stays for another 6 months. But that was not the case this time. Carlos's renewal did not come through. The brokerage firm, with all of their struggling to rearrange people and workers, they cut out all of their consultants. So not only Carlos, but all of the financial consultants that had been working there were let go. They were laid off. They were never full-time employees, but their contracts were not renewed. And Carlos just did not come back. And of course, I didn't call because his family was there, so I just didn't. I waited for him to call me, and I tried calling his cell phone several times, but the cell phone was not picked up. The cell phone was blocking my number, and texts were not being answered. And I remember just waiting and waiting and waiting for him to come back. I was so delusional and enthralled in this relationship that I just did not want to give it up. And I remember calling to a friend who had known about the situation, and I was just saying, oh, that bitch, she tricked him into coming back. I hate her. And the friend was just like, that's his wife, and he chose his wife. They've been together for over 20 years. And that's his choice, and you're going to have to move on. And I didn't want to hear it. I was so stubborn and crazy that I waited. I did not seek out anyone else. I did not entertain any other men. I just waited and waited and waited for Carlos to come back. I remember texting him that I was anxious, and he actually responded to this text, maybe with a voicemail or a text back. And he said that, I don't want to hear that you're anxious. I'm here trying to see if my marriage is going to work. I have to see if this is going to work before I make any decisions. So I have to try. If I leave this marriage, at least I know that I tried to save it. Because he really was in love with me at this point, and I'm not just saying this from a delusional point of view. He really was, and he was really contemplating whether or not to stay with Shannon or to be with me. So June passes, July passes, August passes, September and October pass, and still no word of Carlos. Until one day, I get the phone call from Carlos that he's leaving Shannon. He's had it, and he's coming to stay with me in Virginia. And it's like the love triangle gods have answered my prayers. Everything that I'd been hoping and dreaming and fantasizing about was actually coming true, that he was going to leave his wife and come down and be with me. And that's exactly what he did. He left his home in Pennsylvania. I think he told Shannon that he was leaving her and he was coming to be with me. I'm actually not sure. I don't remember if he told her that he was going to leave her and come and stay with me. I don't know if he told his children that either, but that's what he did. He left her and he took a train down to Virginia, and he lived with me. He stayed with me. And I got what I wanted. He didn't bring much. He only brought a couple of bags. Most of his possessions were still in his marital home. But I took care of him. I was still working. I was still going to school, and he still wasn't working after all those months. He was having a really hard time finding a stable job in the middle of this financial crisis that America was in. So he would be at my apartment on my little laptop computer looking for things, and I would be going back and forth to work and going back and forth to school, just like I'd been doing with him living in my apartment. And we actually lived together for about a year and a half. And it was good. Families were being introduced. He was involved in cookouts, picnics, my family's cookouts, picnics. Grandparents were introduced. And he was basically introduced as, this is my boyfriend. And they knew that he was older, but they obviously didn't know the whole backstory behind it. So they were supportive in the sense that he was an older man. They didn't really, give me a hard time about it. And they went along with it. Nico, she's going to do whatever she's going to do. We can't really stop her. So they embraced Carlos, and Carlos was there for my graduation from business school. I finally finished, and we took pictures together. He was at our graduation party. So he was basically becoming part of the family. And my dream had become true, this delusional dream that I was in. And yes, it is still delusional. The story is not over. We lived together in my apartment for about 1.5 years. There was no contact, no smoke, no heat, nothing from Shannon. So was she also finished with the relationship? Maybe. I don't know the details as to what their final split up was, but I think they followed through with the original plan of being separated and getting a divorce. So it may have been true when we first started seeing each other that he was on his way to a divorce or a separation from Shannon, and then all of that flipped once I entered the picture. But now they were actually in the process of divorcing. So that's what I think. I didn't fight with Shannon anymore after that. We lived with each other for about 1.5 years until early 2010 when I got accepted into a fashion school in New York. I was always going to follow my dream of becoming a fashion designer. So I had applied to a school in New York and I got accepted. And Carlos and I decided to see this dream through. And I was going to quit my job at my brokerage firm, and we were going to live off of our savings or whatever savings were there and move to New York. And I was going to go to fashion school. In terms of living arrangements, he was living with his family in New York. So remember that Carlos is from New York City. That's where his mom, dad, sister, yada, yada. That's where they live. His individual home was in Pennsylvania. So the idea was for him to move to New York and stay with his family. And I was going to move to New Jersey. I had family in New Jersey, so I was going to live with them and then commute to this school in New York every day. And that's what we did. That's exactly what we did. So I left my apartment in Virginia. I had a car, so we drove up to New York or up to New Jersey / New York, and I started going to fashion school. We were living separately, but we were still very much seeing each other, and we were a couple. We were in a relationship. As I've mentioned before, I will give my life lesson to my 22, by now 24-year-old self at the end of this saga, because there is a lot more to come, so stay tuned. This is the result of my twisted stitch. I want to say twisted sister. Maybe I'll call it my twisted sister stitch in this beautiful ombre color. Again, this is just a swatch, but what do you think? Do you want to learn how to make this stitch? Do you have any ideas as to what I should design out of this stitch pattern? Let me know your thoughts, and I might come out with a tutorial on how to create this stitch, because I know there are a lot of people interested in DIY and knitting and handcrafts and those of the like. So stay tuned for a knitting tutorial for this twisted sister stitch, and let me know what you think. Thank you for listening. If you stayed until the end of this video, I really appreciate your ears, your thoughts. Leave them in the comments. Let me know what you think about the situation so far. Have you been through a similar situation? Do you know anyone who's been through a similar situation? What was the outcome? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one. Ciao.